Bonjour, everybody. Welcome to the latest episode of Games Up podcast. My name is Cameron, and I am joined as ever by Lewis. Hello, Mr. Crawford.
Hello, hello.
How are you?
Fine and dandy.
Fine and dandy.
Yes.
Excellent. Sometimes I find myself one or the other.
Yeah, it's never nice when you're dandy, but not fine.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Firstly, before we go any further, I want to say a massive, massive thank you to the wonderful response to our E3 predictions. It's our second episode ever to go over 100 people listening to it. I don't know what word I was looking for there. To go over 100 listens, and that's really, really lovely. So thank you very much. We appreciate the response to it. And then secondly, I want to say that the audio quality might be a bit odd this week, because usually we record in weather that is fine and nondescript. However, this week, the UK is experiencing the kind of storms that we should have had all year, collapsed into one weekend. And so if there's very loud rain, sorry, blame God, I guess, or very loud hail or thunder, that's very much out of our control, and I live in a big echoey house, so it may well happen. Apologies if it does. Lewis, I'd ask you what you've been playing this week, but I know what it is, and it's our indie game of the week, so tell me, what is it?
Yes, so the indie game this week is Fury. And that's Fury with an I, not with a Y. So, what if you found Dark Souls bosses far too easy? What if parrying wasn't just a way to do some extra damage, but the only real way to avoid it? Then this might sound like it's good for you. The game is a mix of third-person action combat and bullet hell. You play as a samurai with the goal to kill 9 bosses to escape your prison. There are no other enemies in the game, just the uniquely designed bosses one after the other. The game's harder than hard. But like Dark Souls, you try and you try until you can overcome the sometimes just unfair challenge. I haven't completed it yet, I should say. I highly recommend it for anyone who wants to feel a challenge, but it's not something I'd recommend for playing for too long. It's very much one of these things like you'll play it for 10 minutes and go, I've died 3 times now and I don't want to play it anymore. So very much a mix of that kind of difficult kind of gaming, but also just really fun and entertaining. Very unique and very challenging. The game's only £16 on Steam and MS Store, PS Store, as well as being available on Nintendo Switch. It doesn't have the best of review scores on Metacritic, because a lot of game critics need to get good.
I'm really unproud that you said that. So in the week that Dark Souls Remastered has made its way out to the market, if you find Dark Souls to be more of a pleasant tickle than a pure fucking fury is the way that you can go about that, apparently.
Definitely right.
Is it really hard then?
Yeah, I mean the thing is that to be honest, it's a different kind of difficulty, I'll be honest with you, but the truth of it is that you have to kind of always know where you are. It's very much that kind of level of you have to be thinking about everything all the time. And then, yeah, the parrying system, if you've got to press B whenever the screen kind of flashes, and if you don't, you're just screwed. It's like, Batman, but if in Batman you had 0.2 seconds to press the Y button to block, otherwise you'd be dead.
So that, ladies and gentlemen, is the indie game of the week, Fury. It's made by The Game Bakers, whose website is amazing. I would highly recommend you go and check it out and cook some games with them. It's brilliant. And yeah, go and buy it on all the things. It comes highly recommended from us. That, ladies and gentlemen, leads us in, as it does every week, to the news. And I will say, a week before E3, it's a sparse week.
Yeah.
You don't get any news at this time of the year because everybody is waiting for the waiting to hold out for the next couple of weeks in the hope that they can keep everything hidden and under wraps. And some of them don't and some of them do. That being said, there's only 4 pieces of news this week and our 5th piece of news that will lead us into our topic of the week. So let's get into it. Number 1, Epic Games will offer a $100 million prize fund. $100 million fund for prize pools for professional Fortnite competitions. This is mental. This is a huge amount of money, and lots of esports and games get big prize pools, but none on this scale. This is a huge amount of money.
Yeah, especially for something that is, I guess new in some senses.
Hmm.
Something like Dota that's existed for a long time and has that kind of build up, whereas this is something that's new and free, and you've got to imagine that they must be pulling in crazy money where they're able to offer this on a free game.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, insane. Um, we don't know exactly how that's gonna if they're gonna do like the way it's worded makes it sound like it's over like multiple competitions and different things, but yeah, crazy. I guess they hope that it'll pull in more people.
I think this is very interesting because Fortnite doesn't have the same professional esports presence as PUBG does. Now, it may well have that going forward, especially after this, but it doesn't have the what's the word? It doesn't have the kind of presence yet. It's still building that. And so I think this is a very direct way of them going, this is our way in. Um, and man, oh god, it's so much money. It shows you how much money. Not that they have to burn. That sounds horrible, but like it's so much money.
Yeah, yeah, totally. And I think I guess you're right in a way. It's something that Fortnite's very much captured, like every 12-year-old, from what I understand. Um, but maybe it doesn't really have that scene in the esports, and that's something that I guess, that they're trying to go after. It's a good take.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean it's got to be their way of going after them, and it's got to be as well their way of going it's got to be their way of trying to legitimize it to some extent, because smaller prize pools you'll get younger people going after the prize pool because the money is much more, it's still huge, but the money is much more accessible. Whereas by putting in lots and lots and lots more money, they're really trying to angle it towards the professional players. Maybe in the hope that somebody who plays PUBG, for example, will jump ship for that money. Um, and it's probably very smart, and it's probably going to work a bit. I do think infrastructure will be more important than money, and I think the Overwatch League is a perfect example of that. I think you can have a fairly modest or a good prize pool, but having the infrastructure and the support there to make it accessible and watchable is what makes it a successful esport. But you've got to say that $100 million is going to make an esport whether you like it or not. Like you can't
Yeah,
not make one for that money.
and I do think that Fortnite is a lot more watchable than something like PUBG, admittedly, um, just in its kind of style.
Again, I think it comes down to infrastructure. I think there's ways you can make PUBG much more watchable, and I think
Yeah,
um, it's hard. I don't want to rag on about the Overwatch League. I know you're probably sick of me talking about it, but like, I think, I think the reason it's genuinely very watchable and genuinely quite investing week over week is because it's set up like a real sports broadcast. There are not commentators. What's the word? People who break down plays and stuff. There are there are analysts. That's the word. Sorry, there are analysts who break down each map. After the map, they've made the teams um, work with like a specific color and a uniform so that it's much more interesting to watch them play. And I think little things like that make a big difference to the infrastructure. So I think any game really can be made fairly watchable. But yeah, I know what you mean. At its base form, Fortnite has a lot more going for it. All right, our second piece of news this week is that The Wolf Among Us 2, a highly anticipated, probably the most anticipated title from Telltale, is still happening, but it's been delayed back to 2019.
yeah, it's kind of I'm mixed news with this because I'm very happy for Wolf Among Us 2 still being a thing. There was a time where we thought that maybe Telltale were going through a bit of a rough patch and that we might not see it actually come to fruition because it's very much a fan game, I guess. Like, it's not something that's going to pull in the numbers. It's not, The Walking Dead. It's not something that's got this powerful IP behind it. Like, it does, but it's not like bringing people on seats. So I'm quite happy that Telltale are making this because it is one of those. Like, it's really for the fans. Like, obviously the money, but it's really only going to sell to the fans. So I'll get it. You know.
Yeah, I played the first episode of The Wolf Among Us, and I was very interested in it. I just didn't get around to playing the other four. I do own them, so I should, but I just didn't get around to playing them. I think it's a good thing. I think it's a good thing. I think delays are a good thing mostly, although I do have a little bit of a worry because Telltale have been known to have tech problems and production problems, especially with the way their engine works. And I hope this is for good reasons rather than, I hope this is to give it the time it needs to get out rather than because it desperately needs that time, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. Our third piece of news this week is that Battlefield V or Battlefield 5, I think it's Battlefield V, because V for victory, but it's a bit sort of hard to nail down. Battlefield V was confirmed to be set in World War II. There was a big sort of EA live event for it. There was also confirmed that there will be no premium maps for it, no loot boxes, supposedly. So it's trying to split its player base as little as possible.
Yeah. They released a trailer for it that was kind of, I don't know, it was a bit busier for me. Like, they kind of tried to show off everything that the game is going to have in like 1-2 minute trailer, including like samurai swords and all sorts. But it looked really interesting. It looked kind of like, there's been some backlash because it features a female character in World War II. But putting that aside for a second, it does seem like they're going quite loose with history and even more than that, I guess.
Yeah.
Like, they're kind of, you can imagine that they're going to go down the line of having like not like crazy skins, but you can imagine that they are going to have kind of things that maybe won't really match.
Yeah, I could see that.
Got that kind of feel to it. But it looked really interesting. It looked like a Battlefield game, I guess, in some sense.
Mm-hmm. I mean, like, visually it looks beautiful. I really liked the trailer. I thought it was very honest to the gameplay. It didn't look like the trailer for Battlefield 1 where it's all polished and cinematic. I could imagine you could actually kind of play the game like that. And it's really sad, but man, I fucking look forward to the day when a woman can be on the front of a video game box art and fucking nerds don't whine about it. Like, I know that's really reductionist, but, like, dear nerds, basically, if you want a game that's realistic World War II, it will be slow, it will be tedious, it will be boring as shit, it will be incredibly depressing, and you'll die within 30 seconds. Like, stop fucking complaining and just let progress happen, because my god, it's exhausting at this point.
Yeah.
Ah, Jesus. But yeah, like...
That's fair, but yeah, like, it's an interesting one, and I think, like, going forwards, I'm interested to see where they go with it, because they're being very cagey on the details about like microtransactions and how that's going to work.
Yeah.
And the fact that there's apparently not loot boxes kind of makes me feel like they're going to have quite a lot of microtransactions of some sort. We'll see.
Yeah, they've done a lot of work in kind of promoting that there's no premium content bit of it, which usually means that the premium content is just well hidden. Or at least well not talked about, as in what happened with Battlefront 2. I've got to imagine they've learned a little bit from Battlefront 2, so maybe it's going to be...
What if EA are just like really consumer friendly now?
Yeah, that would be great. That would be great. I'll eat my left foot when it happens, but that'll be great.
Yeah.
Our fourth piece of news this week is that Ubisoft... Sorry. Is that Ubisoft have revealed their E3 lineup, and the lineup is as follows. We've got Tom Clancy's The Division. We've got Tom Clancy's The Division 2, Beyond Good and Evil 2, Skull and Bones. Can't fucking believe that's there. Starlink, Battle for Atlas, and Something Surprising.
Yeah, so they confirmed that there is going to be some things. We kind of know what they are. Or at least there's kind of like, it's either Splinter Cell or Watch Dogs 2 or both. Starlink was interesting to see again because that's the game that you kind of thought would have died now that like Disney Infinity's kind of gone. It was a game that like you would buy like spaceship parts and then you could build a spaceship.
Shit, yeah. Fuck, I totally didn't remember that name, and it was the one that kind of looks like Hot Wheels, but
yeah.
The video game. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's gonna flop.
Yeah, you have to wonder about it because yeah, like now that kind of industry's, well, I guess there's amiibos, but for the most part, like the buyable toys that interact are not around as much anymore, especially with Disney and Lego not doing it anymore. So interesting that they're going to kind of push forward with it. It wasn't something I kind of expected to see again.
It's very odd because the main demographic for that is Nintendo consoles, or was Nintendo consoles, and the Switch isn't really built for that kind of stuff. Certainly not in the way it used to be. I'd argue the closest thing we have at the minute to a successful Toys to Life thing is Labo.
Yeah, that's an interesting.
And the way I think Starlink could work, I don't think they'll do it this way, but the way I think Starlink could work would be position it to an adult audience. I'd kind of be down for buying collectibles. Like, how many people waste dumb money on pop figures? If they could
Yeah,
make the
yeah,
equivalent
totally.
of like Funko Pops that did something in a game, people would kind of eat that up. They just have to position it properly.
Yeah, yeah. We'll see how this works. 'Cause it'll be on PS4 and Xbox and Switch, which is interesting.
Hmm.
It is something that you wonder whether it's really worth having that scope. Um, yeah,
Do you think we're only getting one surprising thing from them?
I think they're already bringing the Division 2 as something that hasn't been seen before at E3.
Hmm.
Um, and then Beyond Good and Evil is similar. It's something that's been seen, but not like it'll be the first time we see. Well, if we don't see gameplay with them, we're not seeing anything. Of Beyond Good and Evil 2, like it's. I think there's one person that's got away with just showing trailer after trailer, and it's Kojima, and like even that one's like wearing thinner than if they show us a trailer like a cinematic of this one, then it's dead to me.
Did you see this week that he put out a tweet that was like, it was him in front of a piano saying, "I'm just making the trailer for E3," which, like, two things. Oh, that's worrying because it's either got to be an in-depth trailer, like the GTA 5 trailers where gameplay is integrated, which I could kind of see happening, or it's another deep dive short film like the Game Awards, and that game is never coming out.
That's the thing. I think like it's not that I don't mind those trailers. I do I like them, but like yeah, if it's another one, then.
That's
But yeah, so
the other thing I really liked about it is the idea that Hideo Kojima makes every single tiny bit of that trailer. Like, that he's even writing the music on a piano for it. Like, can he play the piano? Has he done all the voice acting? Is he acting all the characters? I love the idea that the reason it's taking so long is because the only member of staff is Hideo Kojima.
yeah, yeah. Anyway, back on topic.
Sorry. I think we're going to see a couple of surprising things. I think they're playing us a little bit.
Okay.
Because I just think we know so much of what they're doing, but they've also got a lot of stuff that's come out at this point. Like, if you look at their lineup, as we've said, a lot of it is stuff that's either coming out this year or not coming out for a couple of years. Like, Skull and Bones was confirmed to be 2019. I don't believe for a second that game is 2019. I think it barely has an identity now. Like, I think they've still got quite a lot of work to do on that, if not in terms of the actual production, then in terms of the marketing, certainly. Starlink Battle for Atlas could come out this year, I guess, but it doesn't seem like the kind of thing they'll hang a coat on. Division 2 is out this year. Beyond Good and Evil is probably not out this year. So, like, I don't know. It kind of seems like too much of a cemented roadmap to be a big E3 conference.
Yeah, they could surprise us. But I kind of see where you're coming from with that. Are we mostly expecting kind of like no release dates, just kind of different things?
Yeah, I mean, I guess unless the big surprise is that, like, Beyond Good and Evil is out in March, or like I guess Skull and Bones could be out in March or something like that. But I don't
think
feel
Skull
like
and
that
Bones
carries.
But I think you're right with the other ones. Like Division 2 is definitely not something soon.
I mean, isn't Division 2 confirmed for this year?
No. So Division has no official release date. But Division 1 launched in 2016, so it seems unlikely that it would release this year.
See, okay, so that makes it even more cemented then. Like, what's their big thing for this year?
Yeah,
Like,
you've got a good point.
so
unless like Splinter Cell or something like that is announced for this year.
But I think it's fair to say whatever is announced for this year, because like
I think Watch Dogs 2 early, didn't they? I meant 3.
Yeah, you meant Watch Dogs 3.
But yeah.
But even so, like that still leaves a huge amount of nothing, and that still actually leaves a surprising amount of nothing for next year, especially if we get no confirmed release dates. Like, we know that Assassin's Creed is probably in the next 18 months. When do they start talking about it? We know that Watch Dogs 3 is probably in the next 18 months. We know that there's probably Splinter Cell somewhere. We know that there is probably something Far Cry-y in the works if it's like 5.5. So the question is like, well, no, because they've always done that. Like
Yeah,
Blood
of course.
Dragon Primal, like we know that's the kind of roadmap they follow unless they've switched it up.
It's like 5.1, but yeah.
yeah, but no, but you're right there. But it is something different, and the question is like, have they switched away from that formula entirely? Which maybe they have, and that would be surprising. But I don't believe they have, and if so, this seems like a very sparse conference.
Yeah, maybe you're right. Maybe they'll surprise us, maybe they won't. Let's find out.
Fair enough. And the fifth piece of news this week leads us into our topic of the week. In an investors' call, the new CEO of Sony suggested that the PlayStation 4 would cease support through 2021, which meant that every website in the world jumped on this as saying the PlayStation 5 has been confirmed for 2021. Now, to some extent, this does line up with what we've heard from industry insiders who have received dev kits and so on, saying that the PlayStation is likely in the next few years towards the end of this PlayStation's cycle. But it also is far from a confirmation of the PlayStation 5. So, Lewis, let me ask you this. Our topic of the week, where is the PS5?
So I don't picture it. I kind of do see it as 2021. I don't think we'll see it before then. I think we'll see it advertised before then. Like 2020 will be the year that they bring out and go, here's the PS5, here's what it is. And actually, maybe we see it in 2020, but late 2020, like November 2020.
So yeah, I fully understand why you just hesitated like that, and the reason is because we're going into a generation, or we will be going into a generation that's going to have a very, very weird formula. We started this generation out with everyone announcing their console 8 months before it came out, and to some extent that had huge success. The PS4 sold zonk loads right at the start, and the Xbox One did fairly well at the start as well, and it was helped out by having no console, then all the console all at once. The problem is, midway through this generation, we've also seen the Xbox Scorpio do a 1.5 year lead in and actually be fairly successful with it. It's certainly revitalized a lot of the Xbox brand in terms of hardware, and it certainly pushed good sales at first, and it seems to be continuing to push good sales for the Xbox brand, as limited as those sales generally may be. So the question is, does Sony take a leaf out of the book and go a 1.5 years? And does Xbox do the same? Or are we looking to another big reveal in February with the console out in November? Now, it's fair to say that the console's coming out at the end of the year. That's the way it's always happened.
Yeah. Like the time is always to expect it kind of November, October.
Yeah, it's always been a Christmas present market. It's always there for Black Friday, usually. It's always there for Christmas. The idea is that the time in which you're going to buy a console will be the end of the year, the start of the next, when you get major sales and major cultural events like Christmas and so on and so forth. So it's pretty likely that's when you'll see the console. The question is, when do you see the reveal as a result of it?
Yeah, I think it'll be the same kind of style. We'll see it maybe at E3 2020. I think we'll see it kind of close. I don't think we'll see it before then. I think they might confirm that it will be there, but I don't think we'll see it until then. Mostly because I think, you need more time to get more exposure with something that needs the exposure, I guess. And I think the Sony have such a position in the market where they don't need as much exposure to kind of announce something. I do think that'll change, though, if Microsoft kind of showed their hand before then. I think Sony are very reactive, and they're more than happy to wait until kind of someone at Xbox goes, here's the Xbox 2, and then that like that week the PS5 announcement will drop, and it will just go like counter everything that was said, because just that's kind of the way that Sony have got by for quite a while now.
I don't know. I'm really torn on this. I could see them doing a Scorpio thing where the end of an E3 conference is just, here's your one more thing, and maybe it's a sizzle reel of games, and then the number 5.
Yeah.
Or maybe it's like a sizzle reel of games and a silhouette of a box and the words PlayStation. Like, I could see them doing something very cock-teasy with it. Because you're right, they don't need to really care too much. They could, like, Sony are in a very, very weird position where they've done some work, but not like a huge amount of work. Really, they've done good work with their software, but they haven't really like. When you think of hardware and UI upgrades specifically, they haven't given the support that certain other companies have. Especially when you look at the Scorpio compared to the Pro. And so right now, they're in a very weird situation where they just use software to sell games. And that's not been standard in the industry for a while, especially towards the end of last generation with the writer's strike and all that jazz. So I could see them doing it a few ways, and one of the ways is so unlikely, but I'd kind of love to watch it. I could see them doing a Microsoft thing, i.e., dropping a trailer, and then and then PS5 is a year and a half later. I could see them doing it the PlayStation way, where there's a reveal event in February, and there's a fucking deluge of news, and then the console's out in December. I could also see them doing a Sega Saturn, and the console is out next week.
Okay. That'd be interesting. Gosh. Yeah.
Like, of all the companies in a position to do it successfully, they are the one. Because they have so many people on that user base and so many pieces of software. Like, selling a console is a very weird thing these days, because it used to just be about which console is better, but now it's about which console is better, but where are my friends playing? Where do my achievements go? Where have I got the game saves? What's backwards compatibility? There's a huge amount more detail in it. And with the amount of users that Sony have in their user base, if they nail the software, I mean, the hardware can be whenever it's ready. And that's a very unique position to be in.
Yeah. I think, though, it's more reason to think that it's going to be 2 or 3 years away. Simply because that would be the best time for them to launch and keep their kind of a conveyor belt going, if you like. I think if we saw the PlayStation 5 in 2 years, then that means that there's a fair chance that we see, like, God of War 2, 5, whatever. Horizon Zero Dawn 2, and all that kind of near the launch. And also, just speaking about money terms, the Xbox One, Scorpio, whatever it's called, X, they still lose loads of money per console sold of the Xbox One X. In fact, there's an interesting graph that came out with the PlayStation conference. What do you call it? Investor talk, where they show you like the profitability of the consoles, and it's like PS1 really profitable, PS2 really profitable, and then the entire period of the PS3 was like massive loss. Especially at the start, like it took so long for the PS3 to be profitable, because when they launched it, they were losing, like, especially because they launched it with the PS2 inside, with the Blu-ray. On the original PS3, the original PS3. Yeah. I remember reading that they were losing like £300 like per console sold or something ridiculous. Yeah. And it took them years to be profitable with the PS3. And I think Xbox are very much, that's probably the situation they're in at the moment, especially with the One X being, I think I've heard like people say that it actually cost them like $700 to make or something. And then I think they sell for like 400 or 500.
Yeah, 400. Sort of.
Yeah, so I've heard that they're making massive losses on it, because you keep the market going, then that's the healthy way to go, and you hope for buy through. And so, speaking of that, it's going to be 2 or 3 years before there's a position where we can release the PS5, have it using the tech it does, and not be, the PS3 situation, which was that they sold it for like 500, 600 quid it was when it launched, and they're not going to want to do that again. The PS5 when it launches is going to be like 400 at most, I think. Maybe 500 with inflation. And so it's going to be 2 or 3 years before they're in a position where they can do that.
I think, I think you're pretty right. I think really the interesting things will be, what does the next Xbox look like? Because really, I mean, we've said it pretty strongly, but PlayStation don't really need to do anything at this point. Like, as if they have a next generation console, which they do, whether they have it now or they have it in a few years' time, if they have it and talk about it in the same way they did the PS4, they'll be fine. It's really about how their competition does. So I think the interesting thing will be, Where does Xbox go? What does Xbox look like? Who's taking their marketing at that point? What does their software look like? I think the super interesting one is going to be what the hell happens with the Switch.
Yeah, yeah, no, that is true.
Because the Switch is behind in hardware already, but it does okay because mainly because Nintendo have pulled sales out of nowhere and also fixed their third-party relations. But the Switch notably struggles with ports. You're never going to see ports of stuff like PUBG or Overwatch or like God of War, though it's a software exclusive, obviously, but like it couldn't run on hardware like the Switch, and so you're seeing them.
Sorry, part of the major issue is that like you really need a developer who's willing to really put that extra mile in to get something onto the Switch.
Yeah. And you're seeing them having to find ways to work around it. So, like, the graphical fidelity will drop, or the features of the game will drop. A fascinating one is this week, Resident Evil 7 was announced for the console. But the way they're doing it is using a cloud system, like Microsoft talked about at E3 all those years ago. And, like, that's very much unproven tech. And if it works, that's great, because that opens the floodgates to some extent. But, man, it's a venture into the unknown. And the thing that's really interesting about it is, like, in 3 years, for example, it's safe to say that the hardware that the two consoles that come out will be running on are going to be light years ahead just because of the way that hardware works. If you look at what a high-end PC rig can do now versus what it could do at the launch of those consoles, the differences are night and day, and they will be night and day again. So it's almost like the differences between night, day, and last week with the Switch included.
Yeah, no, definitely. Just to bring up an interesting point, I do think that the Xbox 2 will actually be quite similar to the Xbox One X.
Interesting.
But it'll be kind of, I guess, rebranded in some sense. But it will still feel like quite a big jump because it'll be using it properly. I guess if you get what I mean by that. I think one of the problems of this at the moment is that you make something for the Xbox One and then you make it like for the Xbox One X, if you like. You then alter it to the Xbox One X. I don't think that the hardware will change too much in the next few years unless something major happens to do that. So I think that the Xbox 2 will be quite similar in terms of power, but will be used much more effectively as games are made for the PS5 and the Xbox 2. But yeah, like getting those games onto the Switch might start becoming an actual impossibility because it will be, something like God of War, like you would have to reduce all of the particles, you'd have to like reduce the size of the world, you'd have to reduce like so much of that stuff to actually make it playable on the Switch. And that's still a game that's PS4 tech. You have to wonder, like, if we took, I don't know, the best graphics card now and made a game specifically for that, it might be just too much to downgrade it that far.
I don't know how I feel about your prediction about the hardware. I think it could be the same if they don't take any risks, but I think the hardware will change more in terms of things like the architecture and the efficiency and cooling and the size of it. I get what you mean about
the cloud.
I mean,
the power of the cloud.
Look, it would be a dumb thing for them to talk about that stuff again. It would be a dumb thing for them to rely on that gimmick. But it must be said that one of the big things that's hampered this generation is you have a choice between two boxes, both of which are very similar, both of which have a disk drive, both of which have a comfortable controller. The competition has come in software, and Microsoft can't compete at the minute. They might be able to compete at the end of this generation, especially with the investment we've seen them do this year. They might be able to start to compete, but the way they could certainly compete is if they go, right, fuck it, this Xbox is totally different. You're now relying on us to provide a different experience as well as better games. And that's something they were talking about at the start of this generation and dropped out of because of response. But somewhere there is an alternate universe in which this generation went ahead as it did right at the start, and I think it would be a far more interesting generation as a result. And this has been an interesting generation nonetheless.
Oh yeah, sure. And I think the cloud stuff was talked about so much at the start, and there's talk about how like Titanfall 1 has a lot more AI than Titanfall 2, because it's believed to be using the power of the cloud.
Really, that's interesting.
Yeah, I'll be honest, it's sometimes difficult to tell the difference between, say, like fanboy talk and actual real analysis, but I have heard a few different things like that. Yeah, I think I am interested to see if Microsoft does kind of wheel out the cloud again. obviously we won't be seeing it from. Okay, sorry. Obviously we won't be seeing it from Sony.
I mean, we might do. They bought On Live. They've got to be doing something. Like, I'm sorry, but PlayStation Now is not what they bought that for. Like they didn't On Live. If you don't know, On Live was a system years and years ago that planned to basically be the Netflix of gaming. You would subscribe and you download games, but the tech that they built was fucking absurd. They built a way to bounce supposedly, and supposedly it was tested and the patents were granted. We never actually saw it in action, so what practically it could do, we're not sure. But they built a way to bounce a Wi-Fi signal off the ozone layer and extend it like a quarter of the world. Like, if that tech that OnLive actually built was real and is there, Sony bought it, and all they've done with it is make The Last of Us playable in the bath. That is not what they're doing with that company, if it's there. And so, like, of all the people who could come out and say the power of the cloud, I kind of think Sony are the ones that could do it.
Yeah, no, I could see that, actually. You have got a point, and you do wonder what they did with it, because PS Now isn't what it should be, I guess. Yeah, maybe. I mean, it would be quite funny if they announced PS5 along with, like, I guess they'd have to call it something else than the cloud. But, like, yeah, the power of the Sony cloud, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. Man, it's going to be an interesting few years, but then they always are. That, ladies and gentlemen, brings us nicely onto the end of this week's topic of the week, and thus the end of this week's episode of Games Up Podcast. We have 2 weeks until E3. We actually have less than 2 weeks till E3. Next week, you're getting an episode on the 4th, of course, and then the week after, E3 will already be in full swing. We're going to be working all the way from the 9th, 10th, 11th, all those days, and it'll be great fun. Thank you very much for joining us. We hope that you had a good time listening to the show, learned something perhaps. We definitely learned a few things, and enjoyed the show. If you did, feel free to drop us a like, feel free to subscribe, whether that be on YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, or iTunes. We're at Games Upcast on all of them, and you can catch us every Monday at 6:30 in the evening, or much, much earlier that day, so you can get it on your way to work, which you won't be going to today because it's a bank holiday. Happy bank holiday to you. Thanks very much. We'll see you next week, and until then, the game is absolutely finished.